I believe that an EMP or an electromagnetic pulse is one of the most serious threats that we face, and yet it's a topic for which there's so much conflicting and confusing information.
So when it comes to our preparations, an EMP is at the very top of our list. If we're prepared for an EMP, we are prepared for a variety of other events. And because of the confusing information, we've been searching, and we've reached out to Andrew Bucchin, who is an expert in EMP and all things EMP-like. And we've discovered some really cool information that we didn't know before from the expert, along with a way that we can protect our home and our vehicles from an EMP.
Hey, Provident Preppers, I'm Kylene.
And I'm Jonathan, and today we're talking about EMP. This topic of EMP is probably one of the most significant risks that we face, and it's the one that, in my mind, definitely has the most confusion and the most misinformation, and we want to get that cleared up, and we want people to understand what it is and what it isn't.
Well, first of all, let's introduce Andrew. Andrew Bucchin, right? We are
Bucchin.
So excited from EMP Shield. And this man, not only does he know a lot, but he has all of the brilliance behind him too, all of the team that has done the research. And so I'm super excited because I have a lot of questions, and Andrew is the man that can help us answer those. So first of all, there's three main things that we worry about, right? The first one is a high altitude electromagnetic pulse, which is known as an EMP, a coronal mass ejection, or a CME that comes from the sun. And then the third is lightning. Now, explain to us kind of the difference between the three of those and kind of how we need to prepare a little bit differently.
Sure, that's a great question. I'd love to. So we'll start with HEMP, high altitude nuclear EMP. That's an energy weapon created by a nuclear weapon that's detonated in the atmosphere. So at roughly 300 miles would be an optimal altitude right above the middle of the United States. And it would encompass the entire United States, basically disseminating at a very low level, 50,000 volts per square meter would be induced into pretty much anything that's a conductor of electricity. And we can go probably way more into depth into EMP here in a minute. But basically, for the folks listening, to break the three different that you asked down, this is an energy weapon. Now, CME, coronal mass ejection, and also solar flare is associated, which I'll explain, is from the sun. So coronal mass ejection is plasma that's released from the sun and shot basically out anywhere into space. But unfortunately, sometimes the Earth is in the way of where that plasma is flowing. It can take it roughly 3 days for that plasma, the charged particles, to reach the Earth. And this is also very devastating. In fact, this could be even more devastating than an EMP. The most recent one would be the Carrington event, which was the equivalent of a million plus nuclear weapons hitting the atmosphere. So very, very powerful, would take down the entire power grid. And then, of course, solar flare, which people are really onto CME, and they confuse. Solar flare is also associated. So a solar flare is an X-ray that's released from the sun prior to the CME. And it can also be not even associated to a CME, which is traveling much faster. So this X-ray reaches the Earth in about 8 minutes. This can also disrupt satellites and communications and many other things on the Earth. It's just not quite as powerful as the coronal mass ejection, and they kind of have different effects on the Earth, but it's important to understand the two. And of course, lightning is something that we all know, and very either fortunately or unfortunately, many people haven't experienced the effects of lightning, but lightning is also a very devastating thing that can occur. It can, take down all the electronics in your home. It can cost tens of thousands of dollars and can pretty much occur anywhere on Earth. For me, we're from the Midwest, and during the storm season, we have lightning strikes all the time. And so that is kind of the differentiator between the three that you asked for.
But the significant difference here is the lightning is a more localized effect, where the EMP and the CME or the solar flare, those kinds of things, they're affecting large areas, maybe including most of the Earth. Is that correct?
That's correct. And, I didn't break that down. So yeah, lightning could be up to 1 million volts. It's a very, very powerful but direct source of energy. But there is something that could be understood about lightning is, although it's kind of localized, it can travel quite far. So in the ground, it can travel, even up to a mile, and it can travel in power lines quite a distance as well. So you'll have indirect lightning strikes that can take out electronics in a house 3 blocks down the road. So it can be that powerful. It just depends on where the lightning strikes and what kind of conductor it's traveling through and what's connected to it.
I'm glad you clarified that, because that helps us understand these threats and how we deal with them.
Okay, and one of the big reasons why I'm concerned about an EMP, right, or a solar flare, is because if you take down the grid, that means we have no power, which means ultimately we have no transportation system. It's just huge. And quite frankly, even though the EMP won't hurt anybody, theoretically, the events occurring because we don't have any power can be devastating. And I can't control the way that my community has prepared and the infrastructure and whether or not it's hardened. I can take some precautions for my own personal family and some of the items that we have. And so that's kind of where we're going to focus on a little bit today. So there are you're out there on the internet, right? And they tell you to do all kinds of things. Some of those are just hokey. They're not going to work. And
Right.
Others will. So do you want to address just really quickly a few of the things you hear that don't work, and then some of the things that do work, and what we can realistically, as just normal people living our everyday lives, can do?
I would love to. And in fact, if you don't mind, first, I'm going to talk about how devastating EMP is so that folks understand.
Yeah.
So as you guys mentioned, so the Department of Homeland Security actually projects that roughly 90% of the population will die within 1 year after an EMP. And that's primarily due to a lack of clean running water and a lack of sewer, a lack of logistics and communications. There's a lot of different things tied to it, but it's a bloodless weapon initially, but one of the most devastating weapons that currently exists. And this is a weapon that's been threatened by several of our adversaries to the United States within the last 18 months. Just so I hope folks can understand how real and how devastating it is, as you guys mentioned. But now, as far as not really myths, but things that occur for misunderstanding about EMP, there's only a few things that are really, truly effective against EMP. And the first, which is one of the oldest, is a Faraday cage. So if it is a true Faraday cage, which means is it completely enclosed, Faraday cage with a metal substance that's able to induce the electrons and not allow any signal inside of that cage without the devices inside touching the cage, that is a true effective Faraday cage. And that is one of the most effective things that exists. And being from EMP Shield, we make a device that is new compared to the Faraday cage. It's important for me to explain to people and for people to understand that the Faraday cage is incredibly effective, but it has limitations, very big limitations. And as an example, anything you put inside of the Faraday cage, you can't use anymore. It has to stay inside of there to be protected, as opposed to our device, which is EMP Shield, which allows for the protection of electrical systems and electronics while they're in operation. But we'll get more onto that later. But as far as other things that people need to be careful of, one of the things, and I think we had talked about this, I saw a list that you guys wrote some questions, was microwaves. So one of our physicists actually said that a microwave is a sloppy Faraday cage. I don't know why he said it that way, other than he gave a little bit of example, but even in some people can try this, but in some microwaves, you could put your cell phone on there and it'll still receive a signal, which means that it's not a truly effective Faraday cage. It might provide some attenuation, which means some ability to protect, but it's not always going to give 100%. So folks that think their microwave is their solution, be very careful about that. That's one of the myths that you see that all over the web. And I'm like, ooh, please be careful. Another is that you can disconnect in your vehicle. A myth is that you can just disconnect your wires from the battery and that your vehicle's protected. That's a myth. That's not true. So the induction of these freed electrons during an EMP are going simultaneously into everything. And it does not need to be a complete circuit for it to still induce this energy. And so anything with transistors, resistors, diodes, silicon arsenide, which is a substance, or microprocessors has a very high likelihood of being destroyed in a vehicle, whether it's connected or disconnected from the battery. So that's another myth. And then another big one, and I'll give some context as to why afterwards, but one of the things that I see quite a bit that really kind of, I don't want to say makes me shake my head, but makes me kind of say, is Faraday cloth. Okay, Faraday cloth is a big thing, and it is going to provide some protection. People think, okay, the EMP is coming from here, and it's going to protect from this. So here's the thing. the EMP is going to bounce off of the ground and then go back up. So if you put a Faraday cloth over your vehicle, it's still going to have electricity hitting it underneath the Faraday cloth coming from below the vehicle. So the cloth itself is quite effective if it's coming from this direction, but it's not providing a complete Faraday cage. So it's not going to protect your vehicle unless it has other protection systems on it. And so that's one of the big ones. And the reason that we know this, we haven't personally protected Faraday cloth yet, although we will be soon. There's a test that was done at one of the government laboratories. It's not a public test, but they were testing vehicles through the effects of EMP, not from the EMP Commission. This is a more modern, I think 2013 or 14. And what they realized is they were comparing Ford versus Chevy. And they couldn't understand why one, I won't say the name because I don't want to get in trouble, but one of the brands was having much more significant effects. And the reason was the wiring harnesses were on the outside, on the underside of the vehicle, exposed, and it was hitting the ground and bouncing up into the vehicle. And so there's all these data points that show how the energy is going to come back up. So anyways, that's just, I won't go too in depth on Faraday cloth, but it's effective. It's not 100% effective unless it's a complete Faraday cage. So
I'm going to kind of interrupt here for 1 minute. One of the things that I love about your site, you guys go to EMP Shield, they have all kinds of research. There's a place you go and they have linked to massive amounts of documented studies and like things that were prepared for Congress. And if you want to learn the facts about EMP, and as much as anybody knows, they just have it all on their site and linked. So empshield.com, right? I'm truly impressed because we've been studying this for a really long time, and that is a great resource. So the things that don't work, we kind of talked about that. The things that do would be the Faraday cage, and then you've got a device called EMP Shield, right?
correct.
And that is available for home. We actually have it on our home and vehicles. I think you've got it for RVs, and there are certain types of backup batteries, right? Battery banks that you have it for. And I think even some communication equipment.
Yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I have a list here of questions that come directly from our viewers. And one of the reasons why I want to ask these specifically is because this is what matters to people. They want to know this. And you are definitely an expert. So the first one, do electronic devices need to be on for an EMP to destroy them?
Great question. So the answer is no. They can be on, they can be off. The way an EMP works generally, we'll talk about the E1 and the E2, the first two phases, is you have freed electrons that are basically stripped from the atmosphere from this nuclear weapon, shot down towards the Earth at very high rates of speed. So the first would be in nanoseconds. And these electrons are inducing into anything that's a conductor. So it doesn't matter if the device is on or off. Anything that's an antenna, basically, anything that can induce energy has a high likelihood of doing it. Now, the larger the antenna, the more energy it will induce. So the grid's going to induce a bunch. Your cell phone is going to induce a smaller amount, right? Overall, there's a high likelihood of pretty much anything that can induce this energy. There's a high likelihood it could be destroyed. And it doesn't matter if it's on or off because the energy is going to find its way into that electrical system.
So you mentioned the cell phone. Is there any chance that my cell phone would survive?
There is, although I don't want to get people's hopes up. So this is where EMP Shield and basically the effects of EMP in general, not just our company, but there's government organizations, many of which we work with, that there is, let me explain this correctly. There is so many variables associated to the effects of EMP that they have computer systems that are so elaborate that have like 320 data points in order to determine the induction rate of energy. It's the angle and all of this stuff. So it's hard to say yes or no, but here's what we know. What we know is the first thing I said, that anything that's a conductor of electricity is more than likely going to induce this energy unless it's in a Faraday cage. And then, of course, if you have a building with attenuation, it could have less. And then, of course, if you have if it's connected to a system with the EMP Shield, then you have none. But the question is, will this be destroyed? And we say to be careful. Yes, there is a high likelihood it can be destroyed. There's also a chance it won't be because it could be a normal 50,000 volts per square meter. So I don't want to say a regular nuclear weapon, or it could be it could be a super EMP, which could be 200,000 volts per square meter. It could be inducing the energy from across the entire United States, or it could be right above Kansas coming straight into your phone. There's so many variables, but what we do know is your cell phone does have a high level of EMI protection built in. There is federal requirements to have certain levels of shielding inside your cell phone. So this is one of the things that has, although we do believe there's a chance it can be destroyed, has a much lower level compared to other things that are unshielded. Take pacemakers, for example. We get this question asked all the time. We don't believe a pacemaker is going to be destroyed. It is such a small footprint, such a small antenna, and has so much required EMI shielding built into it that there's a very low probability that modern pacemakers will be destroyed.
My mother-in-law is going to be so happy to hear about that, because she has asked us and we're like, I don't know.
On the pacemaker.
On the pacemaker. So I am like so excited. Now, if my cell phone survives, there's still the problem of whether or not there will be any working towers, right?
There won't be.
So you're like, oh, well, okay, it's good that this will survive, but don't count on it working, right? One of the things is, will a garden be safe to eat after an EMP? And I think this is where they confuse it with an actual nuclear weapon. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
So this is such a fantastic question, because we get this all the time too. The nuclear weapon is exploding way above the Earth. It is so high that it's roughly the height of the International Space Station. That's how high of a nuclear explosion this is. In fact, it's so high that during the day, you're probably not even going to see the explosion. That's how far away this is. And so the reason I give that information is there's not going to be any radiation released from this because it is that high above the Earth. Now, if it was we've seen on TV or on movies, the nuclear explosion with the mushroom cloud. And yes, that is very dangerous. There's radiation and all kinds of other dangers from that. But with a high altitude nuclear EMP, there is no danger to your plants, to your food. There's no physical harm to your body whatsoever. It is just the effects to electronics and the long-term negative effects of our lives, going back to the early 1800s, basically.
Here's another one. Will an EMP damage solar panels? How about a solar generator or battery bank, lithium battery management system?
So for most solar panels, there will not be damage to the panel itself. However, this is important, is a single panel can have 5,000 to 10,000 feet of copper trace and other very good conductors of electricity inside of them. That's what they're designed to do. And so that means that from an EMP, they are going to collect a ton of energy, which is going to find its way directly into probably your charge controller or your hybrid inverter, whatever that first component is in your solar energy system. So you do need to have protection on the solar system or the energy storage system, but most photovoltaic panels do not require protection. There's a caveat to this, is some of the more modern panels, they have micro inverters on them, which means that they're doing the inverting of electricity at a different location next to the panel. And many of those panels can get destroyed. So it depends on what kind of panel you are using. But for the more traditional solar panels, there's a very low probability that they will be damaged.
But it's other portions of that system that are going to be at risk. Probably not the battery, but those other two components, the inverter and the charge controller, are at risk.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Another one. Will a power wheelchair be damaged by an EMP? If the battery is disconnected, will it be okay? How do I protect it?
Yes, a wheelchair that, so I'm assuming this is one where you can drive yourself around. It will more than likely take damage. We have protected several wheelchairs. In fact, we did a project. I don't know if we ever publicly announced it, with a gentleman who was developing a wheelchair, but you can protect it by connecting the appropriate DC model EMP shield to the electrical system. So most run on 12 volts. We can get you a 12-volt system for the chair, and that would protect that electrical system. But it's really dependent on what type of electrical system it is, and we want to make sure to pair it with the correct EMP shield.
So if I had a loved one, or if I was in a wheelchair, a motorized wheelchair, the best option for me would be to call your company directly and have them kind of work me through which device to purchase.
Absolutely. And we have a fantastic customer service team. I've got 7 folks, over 5,000 5-star reviews, that love to take calls. You can ask any crazy questions you want. They'll talk to you for hours. That's their job.
Awesome.
They're all subject matter experts. So the phone number's on the website. And anybody who does have questions can go straight there, and make sure they let the folks know that they saw us on the show, because I think there is a discount as well.
That's right. It's $50, promo code Provident, right? And they get $50 off.
I've got a question that I want to ask, because I've heard both sides of this. I've heard, and that's things like LED flashlights. lanterns, that kind of thing. I've heard both that, well, I've heard all kinds of things. If it's on, it's going to be affected, probably going to be killed. If it's off, it won't be killed. I've heard that no matter what, the LEDs are all going to be fried. Teach us about lights and LEDs.
It really depends on what the devices that we're discussing. It depends on the footprint. It depends on what type of LED. There's so many variables. I would say there's a moderate chance that they're going to be destroyed. Whether it's on or off, to my understanding, does not matter. But because it has microelectronics inside of it, although it is a smaller footprint, because it has microelectronics, there is a chance it can be destroyed. So if there's a couple flashlights that you really want to protect, it's important to either keep them connected to a protected electrical system or put them inside of some form of Faraday cage or bag, and get them that protection.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now back to medical equipment, because there are so many of our friends, that's what we're really struggling with. They ask, how do I protect medical devices like an oxygen concentrator, nebulizer, or a CPAP machine?
So this is what's great about EMP Shield's home model. And it is one of the most ingenious devices. The way it works, you can think about EMP Shield like a surge protector, because generally speaking, that's what EMP Shield is. But it's a surge protector designed to react in speeds that are not even close to what a traditional surge protector would do. And it also acts in a different way. So if this is the entry point of your house and you have the grid coming in this way, and then the home's electrical system is this way, a normal surge protector is stopping things from coming in. So it is looking out towards the grid and stopping them and then redirecting them very slowly. And surge protectors work for over voltage sometimes in certain things, but that's neither here nor there. What our device is doing is it's actually looking into the house and outside of the house. Because in an EMP, this energy is going to go inside the house directly, and it's going to hit the grid all simultaneously. And so we're looking in both directions, and we're pulling the energy from both directions. We begin reacting or shunting in less than a nanosecond. Actually, around 500 trillionths of a second is when our device begins pulling this energy, and we're pulling the energy faster than the damage can occur. And all of this I'm saying is just so folks understand, when you plug your CPAP into the wall, or you have your modern refrigerator or your air conditioner, your TV, whatever you have connected that has microelectronics or devices that can be destroyed, they are all also protected because they're a part of this connected system. As long as it's within 10,000 square feet, or 500 linear feet, it is protected by the EMP shield. So CPAPs, any of these other devices that people are required to use, whether to stay alive or stay healthy, or they use them in their daily lives, they will also be protected as long as they're connected. If they're disconnected, that's where we can't help anymore. So as long as it's connected to the wall outlet, whether they're on or off doesn't matter.
So if I were dependent on any one of those devices, my best option would be to have an EMP shield installed in my home, and then to keep them plugged in, and then to have a backup battery system, some type of a battery bank or something that was protected, like in a Faraday cage, or it has to be plugged into the system, right? And that way, when everything else is fried, my medical device will still work, and I'll still be able to generate power for it.
That's
right?
correct.
You got
That's
that?
correct.
Okay. All right.
And that's actually,
Go ahead.
that's actually something that, if you don't mind, that's something that I'd love to kind of announce a little bit on this show is.
Yes, please do.
So EMP protection has been EMP Shield's primary goal from when we started, but we've actually just partnered with a company called Grid Down. It's griddown.com. And they have developed an energy storage system that is EMP protected. So it's using a company called Lion Energy, and then it's combined with EMP Shield solution to give folks a very affordable, very robust energy storage system that is lightning and EMP protected. It's very affordable. So I just wanted to mention that on the show because
it's so cool.
It is going to be because having a protected home is one thing. As you mentioned, well, what do you do when the power's out? You have to have some kind of a backup battery system or a generator. And so EMP Shield, along with Grid Down, has now solved that problem as well.
Another question. Will a buddy heater be damaged by an EMP? A buddy heater is a small propane portable heater. Would an EMP damage that? What do you think?
So it depends. If it does have transistors, resistors, or diodes, or any kind of microprocessor, then yes. If it does not have those things and it's just using very basic components, there's a much lower likelihood. For folks, you could look yourselves too, because it depends on what model you're using. If you don't see any just unscrew the case and look in it. If there's no microelectronics, no transistors, resistors, or diodes, then there's really nothing to be destroyed, unless there's something incredibly finite within there.
So let's talk about the EMP shield just a little bit. It sounds like a magic box that is too good to be true. Let's be honest. It does, doesn't it? And so what I'd like to know is, what standards has this been tested to, and how do I know if I'm spending this money? They range from what is it, like $300 to $450 or somewhere, right? Depending on what you're protecting. How do I know that it's not really just the magic box?
No, I get it. So I actually had the exact same reaction. I was in the military and I was considering getting out, but I got a call from Rowdy Meyer, our vice president, who said, "Hey, there's a gentleman who invented an EMP protection box, and it'll protect your entire home." I'm like, "There's no such thing. That doesn't exist." It's everybody's response. Of course, it was a little different when we were going to U.S. Strategic Command a couple of weeks later. I'm like, okay, I understand now, it's real. But for other folks, it's hard to understand. So we have done a myriad of testing, and we actually have even more testing coming up. We've done multiple series of tests with a company called Keystone Compliance. They are a military certified testing facility. So we were there with Lockheed Martin, Boeing. That's the level of testing. And this is an EMP testing. So they are literally using a EMP inside of a room, which is contained, and testing the effects. There we did military standard 188, 125, 461 Golf, 464 Charlie, and RS 105. Those are all the major EMP testing standards, which we passed or surpassed all of those standards. We've also done testing. This is very, very cool, with a gentleman called, his name is Dr. William Radasky, and he's from the US EMP Commission. And we have a white paper coming from him very, very shortly, which will be on the website. But we have done all of his tests as well. And he is happy to announce that the EMP shield does perform very well and does exactly what we say it does. He's from the EMP Commission. So that's a pretty cool thing. For those who are still questioning it, EMP shield is listed publicly by the Department of Homeland Security as having passed the military standards for EMP testing. So we're in a document where DHS, who reviewed the testing, says, yep, they passed. So that's public information as well. We are also a partner with the National Security Collaboration Center, and that's on their website for those who would like to go look. We're right there on the website. We're also a part of the DEMSO team at Joint Base San Antonio, which is doing a Texas grid pilot program. So we're actually protecting a portion of grid, a small portion, to prove that it can be protected before we go nationwide with entire grid protection. So we're doing many things. We're co-authors of many government papers, and we're involved in a myriad of different government organizations as well, which is much of this is public information. So yeah, that is so exciting, because this is a real big, heavy, scary thing for us, right? And when John and I, people ask us what we're preparing for, we are preparing for an EMP, because if we are prepared for an EMP, we're prepared for just about anything
almost
else.
Everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Now this is an interesting comment. And this guy says, what are your thoughts on EMP shield? They have EMP shields for vehicles and homes. John, we've had it for a few months and we've been researching. How do you feel? What's your confidence level?
Well, I'm pretty confident because I've looked at these studies, but I think what a lot of these people are saying is, okay, so what? You save your house or you save your car, and it might get you home from work or whatever, but the rest of the system is already fried. What does it matter if the whole system's gone? I can have my house working, but it doesn't matter because what feeds my house is fried. Teach us.
Sure. No, and this is a question that we either see on social media or get over the phone quite a bit, and it's a great question. It really comes down to people's thinking. I think for you guys, you kind of understand that there's more to it, but I'm happy to explain it. So the first thing is we'll talk about vehicle protection. I could not imagine being 100 miles from home with my pregnant wife after an EMP hits, not having EMP protection and having to walk 100 miles in the middle of the summer or in the middle of the winter all the way to my house. You probably wouldn't survive, because after an EMP, the entire world has changed. It is the Wild West. Whatever you're carrying, somebody's probably going to steal. Not to mention the elements, and people are not in shape. Even if it's 20 miles, it could be the difference between life and death. So having a functional vehicle, and not just to get home, but to pick up your kids from school or pick up your grandparents or go to a bug out location, this is critical. And having a running vehicle is the difference between life and death. But that's just the first thing. Now, for your home, this is important too. Now, number one, I always recommend, kind of like we talked about earlier with the griddown.com, but also with any other backup power system, we always recommend that somebody should have a backup generator with fuel storage or an energy storage system, hopefully with solar, to where they have backup energy that's protected. That's the optimal solution for folks, because if the grid goes down, which is going to happen with a CME, a large CME, or a high altitude nuclear EMP, you no longer have power, and the grid might not come back. It is very true. So you have to have a backup power system. But it's important for folks to understand also, even if you don't have a backup power system, you should still protect your home. And here's the reason why. Number one, the first thing we talked about was lightning. So EMP Shield guarantees 100% lightning protection, and we're backed by one of the nation's largest insurance carriers. If our device does not do its job, we will cover the cost of damage, and it is written into our warranty, unlike the other major surge protectors, that we guarantee lightning protection. It is in the warranty and backed by a major insurance carrier. That's the first thing. Peace of mind, protecting your home from lightning. It's protecting your investment for less than the cost of your home's deductible. The second thing, and this is something many people don't understand, there's a very high likelihood that if we have a CME, it's going to be a low to moderate level CME. It could be a Carrington level event, which is a very large, but it's probably going to be a low to moderate level, which means that the grid might go down for 2 or 3 weeks, but will come back up. So in 2 or 3 weeks, the grid will come back up from a low to moderate CME. And so what does that mean for people that have EMP Shield? That means you don't have to wait for an electrician to come out to fix your home and fix your electronics, and you don't have to wait for the insurance carrier. Because remember, if a moderate CME happens, everybody's taking damage. It could take you 3 years to get your home back up and running, even if the grid's running in 3 weeks. With the EMP Shield installed, when the grid comes back up, you're up and running immediately. Even when other folks are waiting for the insurance and waiting for the electricians and trying to figure out even what everything that got destroyed or what in the electrical system got burned out, you don't have to worry about that. So these are very, very important things for people to understand. Is EMP Shield, it's not just for EMP protection. There's many reasons to have it, especially for EMP, but also for CME, also for lightning.
And one of the things that I really appreciate about it is that everything, all my electronics in the home are protected. And we have brilliant people in this world. I worked for a power plant for almost 3 years. And let me tell you, there are smart people. There are definitely some things that need to be fixed because they are very vulnerable. And that actually was a little bit terrifying for me. But we have brilliant people, and these brilliant people can work to fix things when we all work together. So my hope is that I'm going to be part of the solution. And I'm like what you were saying, my home will be okay. It's not something that's going to need the new, all the things fixed, because I'll be okay. I won't be that drain on the system. So I'm pretty excited. We have actually installed the EMP Shield on our home, and it was really fun. I was the watcher. I just got to watch these guys do it. But we had our friend Marlon, who works in that field, and he came over and helped John. You want to talk about the installation just a little bit?
It was very straightforward, fairly easy. He did most of the technical work, just because he does a lot of that, but it was very easy. I probably could have done it myself. I wired our entire home, and the inspector was very happy. So, I thought, well, I could probably do this, but with Marlon's expertise, I had a higher comfort level that was okay. It only took about 20 minutes to install.
Yeah,
it was really fast to install. And so now we have that up and running, and I'm very grateful that we do.
And now, instead of, we used to always try and keep everything unplugged, now we keep everything plugged in. Because if it's plugged in, then it's protected. Thank you for coming on with us. You've got so much knowledge, and I just really appreciate the confidence that I have, because I do have EMP Shield, but just with some of the knowledge that you have shared, I would encourage you guys, go to empshield.com and check them out. Talk to their customer service. Use the promo code Provident if you would like $50 off. That can really help. And I think it's off each product. So if you get one for your car and one for your home, you save $50 in each. So I think that would be I know for us, that's incredibly helpful.
Right.
So thank you for coming on. And
now for the question of the day. What critical devices are you needing to protect, and how are you getting that done? Comment below. And thanks for being part of the solution.